We're going to read Matthew 5 in just a little bit, but let me begin by asking you, are you happy? Are you happy? You picture Jesus as a happy person. He certainly lived out the virtues of the Beatitudes. And he says, blessed are you when you live out these virtues. This is the way of happiness. And so Jesus must have been a happy person. And he says we can be happy too when we live out these Beatitudes. Dak Prescott was in the news recently. He's playing football tonight for the Dallas Cowboys. And he's the quarterback, and he's one of the best in the league. And he was criticized this week because he talked about his depression that started with COVID. And he was talking about how he was going through a depressing time. And then he had one of the best nights of sleep he had in 2020. And then came the worst news he could ever get. And that was the news that his brother had committed suicide. Ooh. And that threw him even more into depression. And so Skip Bayless on one of those Fox sports talk shows where they talk about sports, even during that time when there weren't any sports, they still kept those shows going somehow. I don't know how. And he criticized him, saying it's a weakness. He says, when you're a leader, when you're a quarterback, you can't be showing weakness like that. You have to be strong. Well, a lot of people spoke up on behalf of Dak Prescott, defending him. And the quarterback said, being a leader is about being genuine and being real, he said. Before I even lead, I have to make sure my mind is in the right place to do that and lead people to where they want to be. I think that is important, to be vulnerable, to be genuine, and to be transparent. And I bring this up because I think that's what Jesus is talking about in the Beatitudes when he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Doesn't mean we need to get poor. What it means is we need to recognize how poor we are in the currency that matters most. San Francisco Chronicle this week, I read 2 in 5 US adults say they are struggling with mental health or substance abuse since the pandemic hit, according to a report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And the prevalence of symptoms of anxiety disorder were triple those of last year, the report added. And a psychiatrist said, as a species, we are resilient, but many generations have seen this level of calamity, but taking care of oneself, living in the moment, checking in with family and friends, getting enough exercise and sleep, those are the keys to coping. And turning off the TV and the computer when enough is enough, that helps too. It also reduces exposure to the added stresses of a national election and its apocalyptic nuances. He said the year 2020 is turning out to be a remarkable test of everyone's ability to cope. Well, this fits in with what we're reading in the Beatitudes, but it also, I just want to emphasize, every day we do self-care, right? You get up in the morning, you wash your face, take a shower, you brush your teeth, you eat breakfast. Those are self-care things. And we do those things in order so then we can be a service to others, and then we can do our jobs and do our school and those kinds of things. But during this pandemic going on, and the smoke and the fires and all the calamities that are going on all around us, it's probably a time to just scoot self-care up a few notches and always be aware of how is this affecting me and how can I cope in a healthy way. And so let's read in the Bible. And how did you talk about calamity? As if we don't have enough. Do you remember where you were when the world turned orange? My goodness. Well, Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. What I want to do, these Beatitudes, they come in couplets. And so Jesus says, like, blessed are the poor in spirit. And then the second line is, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So I'd like for us to read this responsively. I'll read the small or the regular font. And do you see where it's bold print?
Mm-hmm.
The second part of each, and for those of you who can't see the screen, we're talking about the second part of each couplet. So for example, verse 3, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." I'll read that. And then everybody read, "For theirs is the kingdom of heaven."
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I'm fine with everybody unmuting. We may say these words at a different time. That's okay. The important thing is that we're all involved. Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit,
For
theirs
the
is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are those who mourn,
For
they will be comforted.
Blessed are the meek,
For they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness,
Because usually
For
people
they will be filled.
this pandemic, and right now I would be
are the
sitting.
merciful,
Right now,
For they will be shown mercy.
Blessed are the
Brian.
pure in heart,
For they will
they
see God.
shown mercy.
Blessed are the peacemakers,
For they will be called children of God.
Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness,
For theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me.
Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven.
For in the
For
same
the
way
same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
This is God's word. Heaven and earth will pass away, but it says God's word will never pass away. So for review, 3 weeks ago, last time I was with you,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about this first one. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Miroslav tweeted, he said, "We are in a crisis, a pandemic, racist violence, political uncertainty, cultural clashes, and it calls our way of life as individuals and society into question. It's exposing a fragility of our lives, and the truth is we must be confronted with fragility." And he continues on, fragility and death, to seek a more promising life. That's Jesus. The healthy do not need and do not seek a doctor. They are sick, and yet faced with death, most of us crave not a new life, but the life we've always known, the very life whose cracks the crisis is exposing. Like Israelites in Egypt, are groaning under the impersonal Pharaoh of this protracted crisis. Let's not limit our hopes to an improved version of Egypt. Let's have a courage to set ourselves on a journey to the promised land. Let's embrace the good news Jesus proclaimed. To summarize, he's saying we're fragile. And that's the reality. And Jesus said it this way. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Give yourself a little self-test here on this and rate yourself low on a scale of 1 to 5, low, or 5, high, or somewhere in between. How are you doing on this? Blessed are the poor in spirit means I have come to the place where I feel accepted by God, when I feel most unacceptable to myself. I recognize my need for God and know that I do not have to earn his love with wealth, status, or spiritual sophistication. I've come to the place where I feel accepted by God when I feel most unacceptable to myself. How would you rate yourself on poor in spirit, 1 to 5? You can speak out loud if you want to, but you don't have to. It's a private thing. Poor in spirit merely means I'm accepting the reality. Alone, we are poor. We are weak. We are handicapped. We're fragile. That's the reality. And when we accept that, we become ready to embrace Jesus Christ and God's kingdom, because it only comes through God's grace and not because we're successful and because we deserve it. God's kingdom does not come to the strong, but to the weak. In other words, God's kingdom does not come to those who falsely perceive themselves to be strong, self-sufficient, self-reliant, those who justify their actions. God's kingdom comes to the poor in spirit. As Jesus said in Mark 2:17, he said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners. Poor in spirit means we all recognize we are sick. Even in our best moments, we still are helpless without God. Among other things, it means knowing your limits. And many of us are feeling more stressed now. We cope with our stress in various ways. And the thing about stress, sometimes you don't know when you're stressed. Some of you are very in touch with your emotions, but others of us, and I'll include myself, don't really know it until we start acting in crazy ways. And we all have different coping skills for when we're stressed, don't we? For me, for example, taking a nap is something I do when I just can't take it anymore. Take a nap. And it's maybe in moderation, that's probably a healthy coping skill. But I can also go inward, where I don't reach out, I don't return calls, I shut down, I watch the news, too much news, and obsess about the news. And that's not a good thing. That's an unhealthy response. Some people with addictions are having relapses. And so when we're in times of stress, and especially if we're not aware that we're being affected by all this Weltschmerz, this drama going on all around us, then we can act out in unhealthy ways and try to cope in unhealthy ways. But when we become aware of how we are poor in spirit, that we're stressed, and how it's affecting us, then we can choose better how we want to react and how we want to cope. And we can give ourselves, sometimes I come to the end of the day and I think, I don't think I accomplished anything today. Have you had days like that? But I fed myself and I got up in the morning and I went to sleep at night. And so sometimes you have to say, well done. That's about the best we can do sometimes, coping. So Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Jesus also said, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. How are you doing with this virtue? Rate yourself 1 to 5. I have come to the place where I can really feel the empty places in my life. I can let others know when I'm hurting and share the grief of others without embarrassment. I can weep like Jesus did. How are you doing? 1 to 5. Rate yourself on blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. One way you know is when somebody's experiencing loss. Are you there with them? Can you connect with them? Can you mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, so I'll move on. Here's the next one. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. How are you doing with meekness? Rate yourself 1 to 5. I have come to the place where I don't have to be strong, the strong one all the time. I can be tender and gentle with people. I've given the control of my life to God, and I don't have to win all the time. How are you doing with meekness, where you don't have to be strong all the time? Meekness is not weakness, by the way. It's just recognizing the reality that we all need God, that we need each other. Sometimes we just need. And then today I want to talk more about this one, the fourth of the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. How are you doing with hungering and thirsting for righteousness? I'll read this. Rate yourself 1 to 5. Spiritual hunger is I have come to the place where I want to know God and his will for my life more than anything. I am more excited about God's will for the world than my own financial gain, success, my career, or acceptance by my peers. I long for God's perspective in my decision making. Do you want God's will more than anything in the world? Do you know what it is to hunger and thirst for righteousness? How are you doing? 1 to 5. So blessed are the righteous, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. But I said it wrong, didn't I? Did you catch it? What did I miss when I said, blessed are the righteous, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven?
Yeah, those who hunger and thirst.
It says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And it's a good thing because none of us can be righteous, right? Yeah, it would make sense. Blessed are those who are righteous. Yeah, if we could be that, that would be great, but none of us can. We all fall short. We fall on our faces again and again. And the only ones who don't are the ones who set no goals and who don't try. But when you try to follow God's way to avoid temptation, to avoid succumbing to temptation, and instead choosing God's proactive ways of making things better for others around us and better for ourselves, when you really try to do that, you find out, wow, we all fall short. And Jesus didn't say, blessed are the righteous. He said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Are you hungry for righteousness? Are you thirsty for righteousness? He's talking about an intensity of desire. When he says, blessed are those who mourn their sin, and blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, there's an intensity of desire that probably few of us feel, but we need to feel it. We hope to be filled with the righteousness of God. Most people are in favor of right over wrong, right? You see something on Facebook or Twitter, and it shows somebody doing something that's generous, that's kind, that's helpful, and we click like, right? Maybe we even give it a heart emoji. Most people feel moved when they see images of malnourished children and homeless families, and some give. We want to make a difference, but can you really say that you desire righteousness in your life and in others so strongly that your desire could be compared to hunger? Sometimes this word righteousness is also translated justice. Do you hunger and thirst for justice in our world? Are you doing all that you can to make things right? Do you feel it so strongly that somebody might as well be standing between you after 3 days of no food and your breakfast? You hunger that strongly. There's a lure, there's a danger that we can come in contact with, and in religious circles or not, and it's called legalism. After I graduated from high school, I moved to Chicago. And I attended Moody Bible Institute. It's the three-year school. I went for 3 years. And when you go to Moody Bible Institute, they give you 2 books. One is an autobiography of the founder, Dwight L. Moody. The other is the student manual. And the most interesting one is the student manual, because that's when you learn about all the rules. And Moody Bible Institute had a lot of rules. They had rules about the dress code, what you could wear, what you couldn't wear, how long your skirts had to be. You couldn't wear blue jeans. Your hair couldn't be over the ears. That would be fine in 2020, but in 1974, long hair was in style. And you had to wear a tie on Sundays. No alcoholic beverages. That wasn't a problem. In Illinois, you couldn't drink until you're 21 anyway. No smoking, no chewing tobacco, no dancing, no movies, no visiting a girl's dorm room, no PDA, Anybody know what PDA stands for?
Display of affection.
Public display of affection. We had curfew at night. We had to go to chapel. And it may surprise you to know that I live by most of those rules today. But they're not rules that I try to live by. I just don't care to drink very often. I know God would still let me in heaven if I smoked a cigar, but I very seldom smoke a cigar. My hair is off the ears thanks to the barbers being able to come back. Last week was a different story. I never visit a girl's dorm room. I'm good there. So the rules are not the problem, but the problems, there are three problems that come with legalism. One is it's a focus on external measures. And it's possible to get all the external measures right and be all wrong on the inside. And on the other side, it's possible to be right on the inside, but still get tripped up over some of those measures. Like when Jesus's disciples were hungry, and Jesus allowed them on the Sabbath day to go into the cornfields and pick corn so that they could eat. And people said, oh no, you're violating the Sabbath. And they were right on the inside, though they were violating some of the rules that were associated with God's law, the Sabbath. So there's an unhealthy focus on externals. That's why Jesus said, you know, the problem with you Pharisees is you focus on cleaning the outside of the cup, but on the inside, you're filthy. Have you ever washed dishes and you thought, oh, I'll just clean the outside? Of course not. You clean the inside. That's the most important part. What's really important is clean the inside and the outside. And so, but that's the danger of legalism. We focus too much on externals. It's possible to fulfill all the rules, but not love God at all, and vice versa. For example, one of the things we did at Moody was we had a PCW assignment that stood for Practical Christian Work Assignment. That meant besides the classes, we were required once a week to go out into the community, and we were assigned to a church or a nonprofit organization, a kids club, and do service in the community once a week. And then we had to fill out a report every week that says we showed up and what we did. And so one semester towards the end of my schooling, I tripped up on some of the reports. I forgot to fill out some of the reports. So I filled them out after the deadline, but it was no good. I got 0 credit for my PCW assignment, no credit. So the penalty was the next semester, I think it was my last semester of school, I had 2 PCW assignments. One sent me to the South Side from Moody, where I was involved in First Timothy Missionary Baptist Church, where I first heard gospel music. Well, it wasn't the first time I heard it, but I heard gospel music for a good hour every Sunday when I went to that church. It was a rich experience. And the same week, it sent me north to a neighborhood that had turned Latino, and working in a large Presbyterian church. By large, I mean the building. But inside it wasn't, because because of white flight, people had moved out of the neighborhoods. And so a very small group of people were coming to church. And I was working with the children's church at this big church. I was so angry though. I was so angry. I had this temptation. I thought, I won't do any PCW. I'll just fill out the stupid reports, and you can be sure I will get them in on time, and I won't even do it. You see, I was saying I'll do the outside of the cup, but not the inside. But I decided not to give in to that temptation, and I did both PCW assignments. Looking back on my experience at Moody, those PCW assignments, and especially the semester where I had to do 2, was the most valuable part of that experience. Getting out into the community in the Chicago, the north side, the south side, Cabrini Green, all those crazy places. And it was wonderful. And I appreciate that. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they will be filled. So the danger that comes from legalism is also a spiritual pride that comes when you can check all the boxes, when you get all the reports done, and people look at you and they see the outside of the cup and they say, well, that's a good person. That's a good man. That's a good woman. And so it can develop into a spiritual pride, a sense of superiority over those people that don't follow your rules. But there's a third danger of legalism too, and that is rebellion. This desire to break the rules, that temptation I had to just fill out the reports but not go on the assignments. And Jesus had in his audience a group of people who had a firm grasp on righteousness. They understood righteousness, and though they knew righteousness was a matter of the heart and internal thing, they had developed an elaborate list of rules that could be externally measured. And so you could measure just how righteous you were. And you could say with authority just how unrighteous other people were. And such things as what you could eat and what and not eat, what you could eat, drink and not drink, and how many steps you could take on the Sabbath day before you're a Sabbath breaker. And these were Pharisees and teachers of the law, and they knew righteousness, and they knew the righteous would inherit the kingdom of heaven, and they knew they had a lock on the kingdom of heaven. And those people, to us, Jesus says, no, it's not what you look like on the outside. It's not blessed are the righteous. It's blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. I know some of you are thinking you didn't go to Bible college. That's not your problem. But we still do it today, even outside Christian circles. There's something called virtue signaling. And that's when you advertise all the virtuous things that you're doing. There was a CEO and he took a pay cut, a beautiful thing. He took a pay cut so that everybody in his company from the high to the low are making $70,000 a year. And he's been tweeting about it every day lately. I don't know his heart, but that could be an example of virtue signaling. San Francisco is considered to be one of the most compassionate, merciful, progressive cities in the United States and the world. Am I right? We have progressivism down, and yet in San Francisco, we have housing policies that push out Black and brown-skinned people. Several are doing good work to change this, but the reality is whatever the intent, whatever the intentions, the Black and brown population in San Francisco has been going down. And it's partly due to housing policies. Randy Shaw of the Tenderloin Housing Clinic is doing good work to make things better. And so is State Senator Scott Wiener, who introduced SB 50 and recently SB 92, I think it is, SB 92. I may be wrong with the number, but they're doing good work to try to make things right. They're doing the work of righteousness. So we don't have those rules of Pharisees or fundamentalism, but liberal Christianity also has its own rules, its own language, its own code words that you have to be able to say and do. And Jesus didn't say what they expected to hear, blessed are the righteous, but blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So can anybody be righteous? Can anybody really get it right on all counts?
Nope.
Can any of us be good enough? And the answer is no. There's only one way, and that is righteousness comes to those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who beg for God's mercy. Blessed are those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Lord, have mercy on all of us. And so I hope that's your prayer. Pray it daily. I want to close with the prayer of St. Francis, as we did last time, and we'll do it again next time. And I'd like you to pray out loud with me, would you? If you can see the screen, then pray it with me. And for those who can't, we'll pray it loud enough so as to include you. Let's pray. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there is offense, let me bring pardon. Where there is discord, let me bring union. Where there is error, let me bring truth. Where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, let me bring your light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O Master, let me not seek as much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving one receives. It is in self-getting that one finds. It is in parting that one is pardoned. It is in dying that one is made eternal life.